In some parts of Nyanza, where thousands hit the streets to block polling in last week's divisive vote, the re-election of Uhuru Kenyatta means nothing. For them, there can be only one president. He's our Messiah, nods Gordon Ochieng sitting in the back row of a church in Nyalenda slum in Kisumu. Repeat election. The city was the epicenter of violent opposition protests against last week's deeply divisive presidential repeat election, called after the Supreme Court overturned an initial August poll. Over the past 3 months, Kisumu and the surrounding areas have played a central role in the mass protest movement led by veteran opposition leader Raila Odinga. Uhuru waited under Mwa's wings for years. The local businessman-turned-politician had urged his followers to a boycott, which was widely observed. Here, Mr. Odinga's word can be law, says Reverend Francis Amondi. Although his influence over local politics is not what it once was, Mr. Odinga's 20-year fight for the presidency continues to embody the West's quest for the power they have long felt denied since Kenya gained independence in 1964. From street signs to the name of the local hospital, the entire city seems to reverberate with the echoes of the Odinga dynasty, which began with his father, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who was Kenya's vice president before going on to lead the opposition for 3 decades, but never the country. Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga's supporter hold a placard reading "Baba, your last word is final" during a political rally in Nairobi on October 25, 2017. Photo, Luis Dotto, AFP. Better known as Baba, Mr. Odinga was born in Maseno, a town near Kisumu, the regional capital, where he still has an interest, a huge property perched on a hill overlooking the nearby city which sits on the northern shores of Lake Victoria. During the first election on August 8, which was overturned by the Supreme Court in a move that triggered Kenya's worst political crisis in a decade, more than 90% of Kisumu and the surrounding areas voted for Odinga. And when their leader called on them to boycott the October 26 rerun, Western Kenya did it emphatically. "We didn't vote." On the day itself, voting never took place in 4 western counties. Polling staff failed to show up for fear of retaliation, and protesters threw up barricades across the city and blocked entry to polling stations, chaining the entrances or, in one case, even welding the gates shut. When Kenyatta's widely expected landslide victory was announced on Monday evening, it stirred little emotion in Kisumu. "We don't care that he has been declared president. Why would we care? We did not vote," shrugs 24-year-old Alex Sonengo, who works in a timber yard. "Our president is Baba," nods Robert Oklo, 28. "Most feel that the Luos have been cheated out of the presidency, and it's Raila who will save them. For the Luo, Raila Odinga is the one who will redress the injustices they feel they have suffered," said one Kenyan commentator, speaking to AFP on condition of anonymity and referring to the murder of a number of Luo politicians. Jaramogi. Mr. Odinga has perhaps inherited the political misfortune of his father, who came within reach of the top but fell out with Kenya's first president, Jomo Kenyatta, father of the current incumbent. And the family's run of luck doesn't appear to have changed. Over the past 2 decades, Raila Odinga has made 4 failed attempts to win the country's top office, crying foul when he lost, with the 2007 election sparking months of politically driven ethnic violence that left 1,100 people dead. Until the end of the autocratic regime of former President Daniel Arap Moi in 2002, there were tangible signs that the western Nyanza region had been marginalized. For decades, says Matthew Kurotenuto, professor of Kenyan history at St. Lawrence University in New York State. These days, such marginalization is mainly limited to the presidency, he said. Marginalized. The main roads in the region and its local airport have all since been improved, with moves to decentralize power handing a significant budget to the regional authorities, he noted. And although Mr. Odinga himself spent time behind bars for political activity in the 1980s, it has not held back the growth of his family fortune, one of the largest in Kenya. There are other regions in Kenya that are far more marginalized than Western Kenya, Karo said, referring to the largely pastoral north. Such regions are the richest in Kenya, says the 38-year-old, wearing a spotless white shirt and a luxury watch. It remains to be seen just how far Mr. Odinga's supporters are prepared to go. Dozens of people who spoke to AFP in Kisumu were unanimous in their support for Raila, as they often call him. But some said that while it was easy to boycott an election organized on a public holiday, it was much harder to walk away from your job to stand up to the police. Karo Tenuto pointed out that most of the demonstrators were disenfranchised youth, saying it would be interesting to see how many people would follow Odinga's call for action in the coming weeks. When he called for people to strike on August 14, many people just ignored the call, citing that the need to feed their families trumped presidential politics.